Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something kind of surprising. The potential upside of self-doubt. I
Uh-huh.
know, right? Usually we think of self-doubt as like the enemy of success. What if
Yeah.
I told you it could actually be like a secret weapon,
Mm.
even a superpower? Well, that's exactly what the source we're going to be looking at today suggests. And I can't wait to unpack it with you. I was reading this source, and they opened with a question that really resonated with me.
Okay.
Have you ever had a brilliant idea but hesitated to share it
Yeah.
because of that like nagging voice of self-doubt?
Oh, yeah.
I bet you have. I know I definitely have. And that's where this deep dive gets really interesting. To help us navigate this kind of unexpected terrain, I've brought in an expert who is amazing at connecting the dots and finding like the hidden gems of
Mhm.
complex topics.
It's true. The source really flips the script on how we usually view self-doubt. Instead of seeing it as like a roadblock to success, it argues that self-doubt can act as like a sort of internal GPS system, guiding us towards more thoughtful actions and ultimately greater success.
Okay, I love that analogy, self-doubt as a GPS.
Yeah.
But what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, the source points to the example of Thomas Edison, the inventor of the light bulb.
Uh-huh.
We often hear about his thousands of failed attempts, but rarely do we frame those attempts through the lens of self-doubt. Imagine the doubts that he must have faced, the pressure, the uncertainty, the fear of failure.
I can only imagine. I mean, everyone knows his name now, but back then he was just a guy tinkering in his workshop.
Exactly. And each failed attempt likely brought a fresh wave of self-doubt. But here's the key. Edison didn't let those doubts paralyze him. Instead, he used them to refine his approach. The source even quotes Edison's journals, where he talks about how each failure brought him one step closer to understanding what wouldn't work, ultimately guiding him towards the solution.
Wow, that's such a powerful shift in perspective. So instead of seeing self-doubt as a sign of weakness, we can view it as a signal to pause, reflect, and maybe adjust our course. It's like that old saying, fail fast, fail often.
Precisely. And the source takes this idea even further. By diving into the science behind self-doubt, did you know that research has shown that experiencing self-doubt can actually activate the areas of the brain associated with critical thinking and problem solving?
Mm.
It's like our brain is saying, hey, pay attention, this is important, let's analyze this carefully.
That's fascinating. It's like having like a built-in quality control system, constantly pushing us to improve and refine our ideas. But I have to admit, sometimes that quality control system can feel a bit overzealous. I mean, isn't there a risk that all that self-doubt could lead to overthinking and analysis paralysis?
That's a great question. And the source actually addresses that concern head on. They acknowledge that self-doubt can be a double-edged sword. While it can spur critical thinking, it can also become a hindrance if we allow it to dominate our decision-making process.
So how do we find that sweet spot? How do we harness the power of self-doubt without getting bogged down by it?
That's where the source gets really practical.
Hmm.
They offer a series of actionable strategies to help us turn self-doubt from a potential roadblock into a powerful tool for growth. One of the strategies that really resonated with me is the idea of using self-doubt as a checklist.
A checklist? That's interesting. Tell me more about that.
Essentially, the source suggests that when you're facing a challenge and those doubts start creeping in, instead of trying to ignore them or push them away, you should actually lean into them.
Okay.
Take a moment to write down all the things you're doubting, all the what-ifs and worst-case scenarios.
So it's almost like you're giving those doubts a voice, letting them speak their piece, so you can address them directly.
Exactly. By articulating those doubts, you're taking away their power to linger in the back of your mind and sabotage your efforts. And once you have that list, you can start to systematically address each item. Maybe you need to gather more information, seek expert advice, or simply create a backup plan.
This is making a lot of sense to me. It's about turning that vague sense of unease into a concrete action plan.
Yes. And the source emphasizes that this process can be incredibly empowering. By acknowledging our doubts and actively addressing them, we're taking control of the situation and building our confidence in our ability to navigate challenges.
So it's not about pretending we don't have doubts, but rather about using them as a catalyst for strategic thinking and preparation. I'm really starting to see how this self-doubt superpower works. But I'm curious to hear more about how the source suggests we actually turn those doubts into action. Do they have any other tips or strategies?
They do, and they're all about shifting our mindset and our internal dialogue in a way that transforms self-doubt from a source of paralysis to a source of fuel for growth. For example, they talk about the importance of cultivating a growth mindset.
The growth mindset, I've heard about that. It's all about embracing challenges and seeing setbacks as opportunities for learning, right?
Exactly. And the source suggests that this mindset is essential for turning self-doubt into a superpower. When that voice in your head says, I can't do this, the growth mindset allows you to respond with, I can't do this yet, but I'm willing to learn and grow. It's about shifting from a fixed mindset, where you believe your abilities are set in stone, to a growth mindset where you believe you can develop and improve your skills over time.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually put that into practice? I mean, it's one thing to understand the concept of a growth mindset, but it's another thing to actually embody it when you're in the midst of feeling self-doubt.
That's where self-awareness comes in.
Hmm.
The source encourages us to pay attention to our self-talk, the things we say to ourselves when we're facing a challenge. Notice when those negative limiting thoughts creep in, and then consciously choose to reframe them with more positive growth-oriented language.
So instead of saying, I'm not good at this, you might say, I'm still learning, but I'm getting better every day.
Exactly. It's about training your brain to focus on the process of learning and improvement, rather than fixating on the outcome. And this actually reminds me of a time when I was working on a project that was really outside my comfort zone. I had all these doubts swirling around in my head, questioning my abilities, and wondering if I was even capable of pulling it off.
I bet we can all relate to that feeling. What did you do?
Well, at first I almost gave up. Those doubts were so loud and persistent that I nearly convinced myself I was doomed to fail. But then I remembered something I had read in this very same source material we're discussing today. It talked about the power of reframing negative thoughts. So I decided to give it a try.
And how did it go?
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Just by consciously shifting my language from I can't do this to I'm learning how to do this, I felt a noticeable shift in my energy and my motivation. I was no longer afraid of making mistakes because I saw them as valuable learning opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, not only did I complete the project, but I actually exceeded my own expectations.
Wow, that's such a powerful example of how a simple shift in mindset can make all the difference.
It really can. And the source emphasizes that this is a skill you can develop over time. The more you practice reframing those negative thoughts, the easier it becomes.
So we've talked about using self-doubt as a checklist and cultivating a growth mindset. Does the source offer any other strategies for harnessing the power of self-doubt?
They do. Another key strategy they highlight is the importance of celebrating progress over perfection.
Ooh, that's a good one. I think we all struggle with that a bit, especially in today's world,
Mm.
where we're constantly bombarded with images of seemingly perfect lives on social media.
Absolutely. The source points out that self-doubt thrives on perfectionism. It whispers in our ear telling us that we're not good enough, that we need to be more, do more, achieve more.
It's that constant feeling of never measuring up.
Exactly. And the antidote to that, the source argues, is to shift our focus from perfection to progress. Instead of beating ourselves up for not being perfect, we need to celebrate the steps we're taking, no matter how small they may seem.
You know, I actually had a personal experience with this recently. I was working on a new creative project, and I kept getting bogged down by this feeling that it wasn't good enough. I was comparing myself to other creators, and I just felt like I was falling short.
I think we've all been there. What helped you shift your perspective?
Well, I was talking to a friend about it,
Mhm.
and she gave me some great advice. She said, instead of focusing on what's not working, why don't you focus on what you've already accomplished?
Mhm.
So I took her advice, and I started making a list of all the little wins I had achieved along the way. Things like learning a new skill, overcoming a technical challenge, or simply sticking with the project even when I felt like giving up.
That's a fantastic strategy. Did it help?
It did. Just by acknowledging those small wins, I felt my motivation and my confidence start to come back. I realized that I was making progress, even if it wasn't always visible to the outside world.
That's exactly what the source is getting at. It's about recognizing that the journey is just as important as the destination. And by celebrating those small wins along the way, we're not only boosting our own morale, but also reinforcing the idea that we're capable of growth and improvement.
So to recap, we've talked about 3 key strategies for turning self-doubt into a superpower, using it as a checklist, cultivating a growth mindset, and celebrating progress over perfection. These are all incredibly valuable insights, and I'm sure our listeners are eager to learn how to apply them in their own lives. But before we dive into that, I'm curious, is there anything in the source material about how to actually put these strategies into action? It's one thing to understand the concepts, but how do we make them work for us? in our everyday lives.
You're right. It's all about application. And the source definitely doesn't leave us hanging in that department. They actually provide some really practical tips and exercises
Hmm.
that can help us integrate these strategies into our daily routines.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give us the goods.
Well, for the checklist strategy, they suggest creating a doubt journal. Whenever those self-doubts start popping up, whether it's about a project at work, a personal goal, or even just a decision you need to make, write those doubts down in the journal.
So it's kind of like we're giving those doubts a designated space to live instead of letting them run rampant in our minds.
Precisely. And the act of writing them down can actually help to diminish their power. Then the source recommends taking it a step further by tuning those doubts into questions. For example, if you're doubting your ability to handle a big presentation, you might ask yourself, what specific skills do I need to develop to feel more confident?
I love that. It's like you're transforming those negative doubts into prompts for positive action.
Exactly. And by actively seeking answers to those questions, you're taking control of the situation and building your confidence.
Okay. What about the growth mindset? Any tips for cultivating that on a daily basis?
The source suggests surrounding ourselves with growth-minded people. Seek out mentors, colleagues, or friends who embrace challenges, and view setbacks as opportunities for learning. Their energy and perspective can be contagious.
That's a great reminder. The people we spend time with can have a huge impact on our mindset. And when it comes to celebrating progress, what are some practical ways to do that?
The source recommends creating a victory log. It could be a physical notebook, a digital document, or even just a note on your phone. Throughout the day, jot down even the smallest accomplishments, the things you're proud of achieving.
I love that. It's like a gratitude journal for our achievements. Sometimes we get so caught up in striving for the next big thing that we forget to appreciate how far we've already come.
Exactly. And the source emphasizes that it doesn't have to be anything major. It could be as simple as finishing a task on time, learning a new word, or even just making a healthy choice. The point is to shift your focus to the positive and acknowledge the progress you're making.
So we've covered a lot of ground today, exploring how self-doubt can actually be a valuable tool for growth. I have to admit, when we started this deep dive, I was a bit skeptical, but I'm really starting to see how reframing our relationship with self-doubt can lead to greater self-awareness, resilience, and ultimately, success.
Absolutely. And the source leaves us with one final thought-provoking question to ponder. Instead of asking, what if I fail? They challenge us to ask, what if I rise? This subtle shift in perspective can have a profound impact on how we approach challenges and pursue our goals.
It's about embracing the possibility of success while acknowledging the potential for setbacks along the way. And remember, those setbacks aren't failures, but rather opportunities for learning and growth.
By adopting a growth mindset, utilizing self-doubt as a strategic checklist, and celebrating our progress, we can transform that inner critic into a valuable guide on our journey toward achieving our full potential.
So the next time you feel those pangs of self-doubt creeping in, take a deep breath. Remember what we've discussed today and ask yourself, what if I rise? You might be surprised by the incredible things you can achieve when you harness the power of self-doubt and turn it into your secret weapon.
Remember, you have the strength and resilience to overcome any challenge that comes your way. Embrace the journey, learn from your experiences, and never stop believing in your ability to achieve great things.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into the surprising power of self-doubt. We hope you found it insightful and empowering. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.